Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold, live from the MLB winter meetings in Orlando. And as always, I'm joined by Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report. I know it's like 20 degrees outside in Detroit right now, but it is a cloudy 65 to 70 degrees here in Orlando. So you're not missing out on any sunshine, and you're definitely not missing out on any baseball talk because we have a lot to discuss this week, including the latest on Tarik Skubal and Alex Bregman. All right, the winter meetings are underway from the Cigna by Hilton Orlando. It is a hotel set within a 482-acre Bonnet Creek Nature Preserve. It's surrounded by the Walt Disney World Resort. This is the biggest event on the baseball calendar during the off-season. The winter meeting started Monday and will end Wednesday afternoon. There's a lot happening, including manager media availability, World Baseball Classic media availability, MLB draft lottery, Rule 5 draft. And if you're a beat writer covering the Tigers, several hours spent with President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris and General Manager Jeff Greenberg. I forgot to mention, we're also going to get a ton of free agency and trade rumors, not only for the Tigers, but for the other 29 teams. And that could lead to signings and trades during the winter meetings. We know the Tigers are prioritizing pitching as the winter meetings begin, but more on that in a little bit. I'm here in Orlando for the winter meetings. You're back home in Michigan. It's the most wonderful time of the baseball offseason. Do you expect the Tigers to do something significant this week, regardless of what it is? Or is it going to be the come on, do something meme where the guy is poking the old English D with a stick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about significant. I think in my head, significant is like, oh, they made a huge, multi-year free agent signing, or they traded Tarik Skubal. I'm still skeptical we're going to see either of those things, but I do think they're going to come out of the winter meetings with at least one more reliever, if not maybe two. However you define significant, that's what I picture coming.
Some action would be better than no action. On the eve of the winter meetings, Jeff Kent, the all-time home run leader at second base, earned Hall of Fame election on the contemporary era ballot. He was named on 14 of 16 ballots by the committee as the lone selection. Players needed at least 12 votes for election. Carlos Delgado finished with 9 votes, while Dale Murphy and Don Mattingly each received 6 votes. So they did not make it. And Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Gary Sheffield, and Fernando Valenzuela each received fewer than 5 votes, which means under new rules, those players won't be eligible for the next contemporary era ballot in 2028 that determines 2029 induction, which opens the door to Lou Whitaker being on that 2028 ballot. Tigers legend Lou Whitaker deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He's not there yet. Before we get to Whitaker, we need to give our flowers to Jeff Kent. He played 17 MLB seasons. He won the National League MVP in 2000. He made the All-Star game 5 times. He hit .290 with 377 home runs, including 351 of them as a second baseman, more than any other player at the position. And his 8 seasons of at least 100 RBIs are the most among second basemen in MLB history. I don't know if anyone exemplifies the rare breed that is middle infielders that rake more than Jeff Kent. So he's definitely worthy of the Hall of Fame. I remember Jeff Kent a little bit for his years to the Houston Astros and especially the Los Angeles Dodgers to finish his career. But do you have any thoughts about Jeff Kent and what he did in the late 1990s, early 2000s with the San Francisco Giants?
I mean, he was always a heck of an offensive player and probably a little bit underrated on defense. He wasn't a great defender, but I don't think he was a complete butcher out there. Yeah, it's I feel bad because he was a very good player, but all I can think of when I see another second baseman go into the Hall of Fame is that Lou Whitaker just remains unfairly out. And you know what? Normally I don't even care that much about Hall of Fame stuff because it's I don't know, it's a museum, right? And people get held out for all sorts of reasons. People get put in for all sorts of reasons. I'm not a huge fan of these committees, the way they're doing it. Like, I know the writers have screwed up sometimes, right? That it's the writers' fault that Lou Whitaker didn't get a second vote even, or Kenny Lofton. Some players who deserved at least multiple looks didn't get them. But the writers didn't elect Harold Baines, who doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, but Tony La Russa liked him, so he got in the Hall of Fame. And Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame. And like, hey, great, way to expand revenue and shepherd us after the strike. But also you were in charge of the era with all the steroids, and none of the steroid players are getting in the Hall of Fame, but you got in. I don't love the decisions they're making. And again, I feel bad not celebrating Jeff Kent, but instead complaining about everything else that's wrong. But it's a little bit stunning to me to see a guy who played with Barry Bonds. And I guess he did it right. I don't know. But yeah, lots of home runs. The only thing I can think of is, yes, he's the all-time leader in home runs from a second baseman, and they felt like that deserves to be in there. And then the other traditional, offensive numbers you mentioned, lots of RBIs, played for a long time, good player for a long time. So congrats to him. I'm still displeased with the process in general.
Well, this is the important Tigers topic regarding the Hall of Fame. Like, can we get Lou Whitaker on the contemporary era ballot next time around in 2028? Here's all I have to say. Jeff Kent, a second baseman. He just got into the Hall of Fame, worth 55.4 B-WAR and 56 F-WAR. Lou Whitaker, a fellow second baseman, worth 75.1 B-WAR and 68.1 F-WAR. So if you believe in WAR, and I know a lot of baseball people do, then Lou Whitaker was more valuable than Jeff Kent throughout their respective MLB careers. And not only was Whitaker more valuable than Jeff Kent, but his 75.1 B-WAR ranks 7th all time among second basemen, ahead of many Hall of Famers, including Jeff Kent. I mean, Lou Whitaker won 3 Silver Sluggers, 4 Gold Gloves, is a 5-time All-Star, 19-year MLB career, all with the Tigers. Why isn't Lou Whitaker in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. He deserves to be on the contemporary era ballot in 2028 and inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2029. As for current Tigers news, a few days ago, the Tigers signed right-hander Drew Anderson to a 1-year contract with a club option after he spent the past 4 seasons in Asia, 2 years in Japan and then 2 years in Korea. We still don't know how much money the Tigers are paying Drew Anderson, and I haven't been able to track it down despite my best efforts. Nothing is official until he passes his physical, which as of this recording hasn't happened yet. So I don't have a full reaction to the signing because I don't know all the details. But if we're assuming it was a low cost contract around maybe $5 to $6 million for 2026 with a $9 to $10 million club option for 2027, then I like this addition in free agency. What's your initial reaction to the Drew Anderson reunion?
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting, mostly because of the talk about him being a starter. I think some fans might remember him from spring training a few years ago, and he was also in Toledo briefly. And his stuff looked really interesting out of the bullpen. You know, he was 96 to 98 with missing bats with his fastball and had a high spin breaking ball and a changeup. It looked like, okay, this is interesting. He just wasn't throwing quite enough strikes, and he got beat up a little bit in spring training. He was fine in Toledo, but I thought maybe he might come up as a late inning option at some point. The Tigers must have still believed in him in that way. But yeah, he went off to Korea and was awesome as a starter. And so I think, they always kept tabs on him, and, who knows? It's maybe they wanted to get him and he wants to be a starter. So they said, hey, here you go. We'll give you a chance to be a starter in spring training. We'll see what happens. We still like you as a reliever. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll have you in the bullpen. I have no issues with it. It's in a vacuum. It's like a tiny little move. It depends on what else goes on in the spring or in the offseason. If they don't sign anybody else, that Drew Anderson offseason isn't exactly great, but I'm not expecting that to be the case. So yeah, it's fine. We'll see what the money is. I'd be kind of shocked if it's more than like $5 or $6 million, but we'll see.
Here's the number one reason why I like this move. I think Drew Anderson is Cody Ponce, but with more familiarity, a lower guarantee, and more optionality. For those who don't know, Cody Ponce, he's a 31-year-old right-hander. He signed for 3 years, $30 million with the Toronto Blue Jays. He pitched for the Hanwha Eagles in the KBO League, with Drew Anderson pitching in the same league for the SSG Landers. For Ponce, he had a 1.89 ERA with 252 strikeouts across 180 and 2/3 innings. His 252 strikeouts set the single season record in the KBO League. And for his performance, he won what is essentially the Cy Young Award in Korea, as well as the MVP award in Korea. As for Drew Anderson, 31-year-old right-hander, same as Cody Ponce, he posted a 2.25 ERA with 245 strikeouts across 171 and 2/3 innings, just 7 fewer strikeouts than Cody Ponce. Anderson had a 35.3% strikeout rate. Ponce had a 36.2% strikeout rate. Both these guys are the same age. They're both right-handers. And if it weren't for Cody Ponce's existence, I think Drew Anderson would be the big name pitcher everybody was talking about returning to the United States from South Korea. But instead, it was Ponce. So the Tigers, they flew under the radar, signed Anderson at a lower guarantee because it's only 1 year and with more optionality because of the club option. And then as for the familiarity, as we know, you mentioned it, Tigers signed Drew Anderson to a minor league contract for the 2024 season. After he spent his 2 years in Japan, he showed up to spring training in Lakeland, increased his fastball velocity from like 92 to 98 miles an hour with changes to his mechanics that the Tigers taught him, including the lead leg block. But after he didn't make the opening day roster, he goes to AAA Toledo, pitches in 9 games, and then he leaves to become a starter in Korea, where he spent the past 2 seasons. So there's the familiarity there. I like Drew Anderson because of what he presents when it comes to the upside. I know he loved his short stint with the Tigers, and the Tigers were obviously impressed by Anderson, not only with his developments in 2024 spring training, but also with what he was able to do when he went to Korea. I did not have Drew Anderson on my radar this offseason, but it's easy to see why the two sides linked up in free agency. And then as for the actual fit, he'll report to spring training as a starter. The fallback option is moving to the bullpen. I think that's more likely. I think he ends up as a reliever where he has more experience. If everyone stays healthy, the Tigers have to ask themselves this during spring training. Do you want Drew Anderson as your 5th starter, or do you want Troy Melton as your 5th starter? Right now, I think the Tigers are leaning towards Troy Melton. I think that's a pretty significant lean. But if there's an injury, or if Troy Melton underperforms, then Drew Anderson could slot in as the 5th starter. The stuff seems legit. Like in Korea, it was a fastball that was sitting around 95, maxing out at 98.6 miles an hour. That was as a starter. He developed a new kick change, which sits at 89 miles an hour. It appears to be a real weapon. He also throws a curveball, cutter, and sweeper. So the 5-pitch mix here is headlined by the fastball and the changeup, but it's still a 5-pitch mix that should be able to play as a starter or a reliever. But how effective will it be against MLB hitters? I think only time will tell with that. Don't forget Victor Reyes, old Tigers friend, went to the KBO League and hit .352 with a .904 OPS in his first season with the Lotte Giants. I think that tells you everything you need to know about the competition level in Korea. So with that being said, do you worry about Drew Anderson making the transition back to MLB in the United States, especially if it's as a starter, when you know exactly what Victor Reyes did when he went from the big leagues to the KBO League?
Became Ted Williams. I'm not too worried about it. I think that the key thing you mentioned there was the development of the kick change. I mean, the reason Cody Potts got so much money is he developed a splitter over in Korea and then refined his command. And so when you come back as a different pitcher, at least slightly different, I think it changes things. And yeah, if I'm not worried about the competition level, I saw he looked good enough to get outs in the bullpen in the big leagues, at least, on a semi-consistent basis. If he has another pitch, that may make him better. So not too worried about the risk there. Just, curious to see how it looks when he comes back.
All right, let's get into the big two. Question 1 of the big two. What are we keeping an eye on for the Tigers at the winter meetings? For me, 5 things I'm watching. Will the Tigers trade Tarik Skubal? Are the Tigers going to sign Alex Bregman? Do the Tigers need another starting pitcher? How should the Tigers upgrade the bullpen? Should the Tigers trade for an outfielder? We're going to get to Alex Bregman in a little bit, so let's skip that for now and start with Tarik Skubal. Tigers have a decision to make because they are not going to force a Tarik Skubal trade, but he is not considered untouchable in trade conversations. If a club makes an offer the Tigers can't refuse, then Skubal will be on the move. If it's an offer the Tigers can't refuse. He's set to become a free agent after the 2026 season. The Tigers are going to ask a ton for him in any trade negotiations that happen, but I don't see how the Tigers and a different team align on value, because the Tigers view Skubal as the most valuable pitcher in baseball, and the other 29 teams are going to view him as a 1-year rental, which makes a trade unlikely. I think it's just difficult to imagine the Tigers, known for their caution, their stubbornness in these negotiations, to really find equal value with a different team in a Tarik Skubal trade. But if they're not going to trade him, then they have to build around him, or you just keep him and you let him walk for nothing more than draft pick compensation. I don't know. What do you think about where we're headed here in the Tarik Skubal saga? Because obviously with the winter meetings, free agent rumors, trade rumors, they heat up. Tarik Skubal is going to be the talk of the week. Do you think he gets moved here at the winter meetings, or do you think the Tigers hold on to him? And if they hold on to him here at the winter meetings, does that signify that they're going to hold on to him all the way through the 2026 season?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that is kind of the biggest storyline there, right? Like the winter meetings are when the blockbusters happen, seemingly. Sometimes you get one at the trade deadline, but more often than that, it's in the winter meetings. And Skubal represents the biggest blockbuster out there, unless somebody comes from left field. I do, there's been all sorts of stories about, hey, the Tigers are listening. I think the Tigers should trade him, all that stuff. I fall into that status of I'll believe it when I see it. I still, like you said, they're pretty cautious with stuff like this. I don't think they're going to go out there searching to trade Tarik Skubal. One thing I do think might happen is, I saw a report that they're telling teams to give them their best offers, right? Whatever. But I do think maybe just by engaging with more teams, they might work out a smaller deal somewhere. They might find out like, oh, that guy's available. What about we do this? And you might see something else happen, sort of tangentially related, because they were talking about Tarik Skubal. Again, unless somebody just goes, screw it. Here, have our best young starter and our 2 best prospects. I don't think they're going to do it. But, you never know. Maybe you guys get together, have some drinks, make a bad decision, and there you go.
No, that's where I'm at with Tarik Skubal. I still view a trade as unlikely, maybe even less likely than when the season ended, just the way that the offseason has progressed and everything that we've heard about the Tigers and everything that we haven't heard about the Tigers as well. I mean, this team has not come out and said, hey, we're shopping Tarik Skubal. They haven't said anything. The Tigers have given a bunch of no comments, whether it's Scott Harris or Jeff Greenberg, haven't said a whole lot. And with where the Tigers are at, no, Tarik Skubal is not untouchable, but at the same time, it has to be an offer the Tigers can't refuse. And if the Tigers are in trade conversations, that asking price will be sky high for Tarik Skubal, so much so that I just can't imagine one of the other 29 teams saying, yeah, take our best starter and take our best 2 prospects, and we're going to do that deal for 1 year of Tarik Skubal, knowing that he's going to become a free agent after the 2026 season. Like, that's just where the value doesn't align with a pitcher of Tarik Skubal's magnitude, a reigning 2-time Cy Young winner. So with that being said, I am not expecting Tarik Skubal to be traded at the winter meetings, but crazier things have happened. As for starters, the Tigers have 5 pitchers set for their rotation. Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Troy Melton, plus Drew Anderson. My question is this: should the Tigers feel comfortable with Skubal, Olson, and Flaherty as their top 3 starters?
I wouldn't say comfortable, just given that Olson hasn't stayed healthy for an entire season and Flaherty's been so up and down. Obviously, Skubal is going to carry that. You would like for them to target a top of the rotation arm. It's somebody who would take over maybe as the ace after Skubal's gone, but that doesn't necessarily seem like something that's going to happen. You know, there's been talk, we talked about last week about Michael King. He would be an interesting name along those lines. There's lots of talk about Mackenzie Gore being available. That would not really solve a whole lot of things because he's kind of Tarik Skubal minus a year and not as good. Like, he's a Boris client, a lefty. He had a really bad second half last year. It would be an interesting frontline arm for a year or two, but you're just kicking the can down the road there a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I in my head, just based on what they've done in the past, I do feel like they're going to add another pitcher who can start beyond Drew Anderson. Maybe it's another actual starter or another reliever, the starter conversion candidate. But yeah, as much as it would, I think you need another good frontline arm. Maybe that's something you could approach at the trade deadline down the road. If you're looking really good again and you're like, we need that second pitcher to get us through the postseason, maybe you could do it then, but I'm not necessarily thinking they're going to do it now, even though they might want to.
When I look at the 3 names that I mentioned, Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, Jack Flaherty, yeah, Skubal is elite, but Olson has the injury history. Flaherty has been inconsistent. I think that's why you go out and you acquire a high upside starter to slot behind Skubal, not only for 2026, but also then to maybe take over as the primary frontline starter once Tarik Skubal becomes a free agent. I think that raises the Tigers' ceiling, especially in the upcoming postseason. If the Tigers were to get there, you just think about a best of 3 wild card series. How much better do you feel about Tarik Skubal, Michael King, and Reese Olson than you do about Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, Jack Flaherty? I think that raises the bar significantly. I do think Michael King is the best fit. He had the shoulder and the knee injuries that limited him to 15 starts in 2025. That makes him a buy low candidate for the Tigers, but also it makes him a buy low candidate for at least a dozen other teams. And when he's healthy, he does have the potential to be one of the best starters in the big leagues. I really like Michael King. I think the next best fit is Zach Gallen. And then beyond that, you're talking about guys like Chris Bassett. So we'll see what the Tigers end up doing on the starter front. But I definitely think it would benefit them to go out and get one more arm to pitch behind Skubal in the rotation. I think that's something that they're looking to do. As for the bullpen, the reliever market has already moved quickly. The notable signings: Devin Williams for 3 years, $51 million with the New York Mets; Ryan Helsley, whom the Tigers preferred as a starter, for 2 years, $28 million with the Baltimore Orioles; Emilio Pagan for 2 years, $20 million with the Cincinnati Reds; and Raisel Iglesias for 1 year, $16 million with the Atlanta Braves. Upgrading the bullpen is a priority for the Tigers, but with this fast-moving market, I think it's fair to wonder if the opportunity to secure a high-leverage reliever, or 2 of them, is going to pass the Tigers by if they don't get aggressive here at the winter meetings. Like, let's say the Tigers sign someone like Michael King to join the rotation. Then you can shift both Drew Anderson and Troy Melton to the bullpen, but that still doesn't solve the core issue that is Will Vest, the only reliever the Tigers can trust in high leverage situations. And if the Tigers don't act fast, there might not be any favorable options available in free agency because this reliever market has been moving very quickly. So even more so than Tarik Skubal and Alex Bregman, what I'm watching with the Tigers at the winter meetings is how they address their rotation and upgrade their bullpen. For the record, again, I don't think Tarik Skubal gets traded at the winter meetings, and I don't think Alex Bregman signs at the winter meetings. And if both those things are true, then pitching is going to be the spotlight for the Tigers, both the rotation and the bullpen.
Yeah, I think the relief market is the thing I'm watching the closest here at the winter meetings. There still are a number of interesting sort of middle relievers that might help the team. We talked last week, like there's just not a whole lot of people to trust. So you don't want to go the just bodies route of commando / last year's trade deadline.
Been there, done that, don't want to go back.
But there's some interesting guys out there you can probably get for, I don't know, 7 to 10 million for 1 or 2 years. I mentioned Sir Anthony Dominguez before. There's Brad Keller. We've got, Hunter Harvey's out there. There's some other interesting names. So I'm curious to see which from that group they'll go. I keep thinking in my head that they're going to do, like, they're going to sign Steven Matz as another guy that say, hey, we'll give you a chance to start. And then he just becomes their third lefty reliever. But yeah, there are interesting names out there that should help the bullpen. I'm like the way I'm not expecting a frontline starter. I'm not expecting a closer level or even like a setup man level reliever, but they do need to go out and get a couple good relievers.
Why do the Tigers keep targeting these relievers with plans to turn them into starters? Like 1, it was Ryan Helsley. 2, it was Brad Keller. And now you mentioned Steven Matz as a potential third name, but the Tigers showed interest in both Ryan Helsley and Brad Keller. Ryan Helsley obviously signs with the Orioles. Brad Keller still a free agent, could be in play for the Tigers. And Steven Matz is a great name there as well. Why do they keep doing this?
Well, and Roy Anderson too. Our buddy Rogelio Castillo, he wrote an article about this at his roundtable thing, and I want to get too reductive, and you should go read it if you get a chance. But it's essentially boiled down to kind of an extension of the pitching chaos idea and saving money. And like the main reason I can think to do it is that pitcher wants to be a starter, and you say, sure, we'll give you a chance to start, even if you don't mean it. If it gets you to sign the guy, you say sure. And beyond that, I don't know. It does feel like, they're just so confident in their ability to help these pitchers and make them better. And we've seen it a couple times. We've seen other times not so much. Generally speaking, it's worked fairly well for the guys they sign before the season and have a chance to work with them all spring. There was no helping Kenta Maeda, unfortunately, but Michael Lorenzen worked out well. Jack Flaherty, at one point. So they believe in their ability to do that. And I guess the other thing is, like, the Helsley one doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, right? Like, that's a guy who was going to get paid like a second tier reliever. And he got that, $14 million a year. So I think the idea, maybe you can take somebody who's more like a middle relief market, a $4 to $8 million a year, and turn him into a solid number 4, number 5 starter. And that's a great value. But why are you so worried about getting value instead of getting good pitchers? That's the thing that I don't quite get.
And the Tigers went all in there too, by the way. I mean, they had a whole presentation that they laid out for Ryan Helsley. I mean, he had strong interest in signing with them to become a starter, but ultimately decided that being a reliever, being the closer of the Orioles was the best path forward for him. I'm sure he's thinking down the road about an Edwin Diaz type of contract if all goes well in 2026 and he's able to exercise that opt-out clause and hit the free agent market again next offseason. I'm sure he's thinking about a big deal that he could lock down as a closer. It's probably the safer play for him as well. But the Tigers, they were all in on the Ryan Helsley experiment, and they were very thorough in their presentation. They impressed him and his representatives. Like, Tigers did a fantastic job there. They weren't able to land him, but that was something that they were very committed to trying to make happen.
It is very interesting, and I'd love to, be able to talk to them and figure out what they think there's, what they see. But of course, they will never say that because they view it as their sort of competitive advantage. But this also isn't necessarily a new phenomenon. People may remember this. The Tigers turned Phil Koch into a starter back in 2011. Now, he had started in the minors and then came up as a reliever. And they're like, well, we need a fifth starter, so let's try Phil Koch. And he wasn't great in that role. It was like close to a 5 ERA. He survived. And then they moved him back to the bullpen. And so that's like, I don't mind if you're trying this, right? If you think you can do it and you think you can get a good start out of it, that's fine. What you don't want to do is just keep doubling down on it if it's not working. And Phil Koch basically just couldn't strike anybody out as a starter. That was the main issue. So like, if you want to give it a try, just don't keep with it, because you don't, all those wins matter. So if you're trying to force this square peg into a round hole for the first half of the season and you lose 2 games that you shouldn't, that's huge. So just be mindful of that. Give it a try. Do your stuff. If it works, good. If it doesn't, don't be married to it.
Some high leverage reliever options the Tigers could pursue in free agency for traditional reliever roles. Kyle Finnegan, Pete Fairbanks, Anthony Dominguez, Hunter Harvey, Kenley Jansen, Brad Keller, Robert Suarez, Luke Weaver, and of course, Edwin Diaz. I think my favorite options within reason, which means no Edwin Diaz, Luke Weaver, Kyle Finnegan, and maybe give me Hunter Harvey while we're at it. I think Luke Weaver, Kyle Finnegan, and Hunter Harvey would be the exact type of quantity and quality additions the Tigers desperately need in their bullpen, rather than the trade deadline mistake of quantity over quality. The Tigers had interest in Kyle Finnegan and Pete Fairbanks in the reliever market. It sounds like Pete Fairbanks could sign here at the winter meetings, while Finnegan and the Tigers, as of now, they're not close to an agreement. So maybe put a pin in that while we're here today. But if the Tigers added those two and nobody else, would you be satisfied with Finnegan and Fairbanks as the only bullpen upgrades, or would that leave you wanting more?
On paper, it would be fine. I guess I do think it would be a little underwhelming. It's now been 2 full seasons since Fairbanks was like an elite strikeout guy. He remains an elite interview guy. It would probably be an asset to the locker room and a lot of fun for the beat writers. He's a funny dude who says whatever he thinks. But as for like as good as Chris Fetter and Juan Nieves and Robin Lund are, I'm not sure how much more they can mine out of him. I feel like they could get more out of guys who come from the Nets or, the Cardinals or something like that, but maybe not the Rays. The Rays are pretty good at getting everything out of their pitchers. And as Greg Jewett told us last week, you would probably be a little bit worried about Fairbanks' Raynaud syndrome in cold weather. You can't feel your 2 fingers when it gets cold. That's not ideal for a pitcher. Again, it's probably fine. Like a Finnegan in Fairbanks is better than Finnegan and Canely, which they had last year. It's just kind of a very moderate upgrade.
So we just covered a lot of topics, but is there anything else that you're keeping tabs on regarding the Tigers and free agency and trades at the winter meetings? Maybe 2 trade candidates, Boston Red Sox outfielder Jarren Duran or Arizona Diamondbacks infielder Ketel Marte. Any thoughts there or on anything else here as the winter meetings are underway?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought much about them targeting a bat. The Tigers are just such a strange situation here where they don't have any real obvious holes, but they also don't have any real obvious stars. Riley Green, you could say, is a star left, and Gleyber Torres has been an all-star and all this good stuff. The only real obvious hole is where they have the most financial commitments. It's shortstop with Javi Baez, and now you can play him at center or whatever. That doesn't mean they can't upgrade, but it does make it a little bit harder to find a good fit for an upgrade. The Marte stuff is interesting because he's a very good player. My buddy Jerry, went and posted on Twitter that he's pretty darn close to Jose Ramirez over the last several years. One of the better hitters in baseball. He is 32, and you'd have him signed to the age 38 season, which is basically like what you'd get from Bregman, I think, right? If you sign Bregman now, you're probably going to have him through that, that same time frame. Only Marte would be cheaper. The issue becomes, Marte is only a second baseman. He's played different positions, but not really in any real capacity since 2021. And you have Gleyber Torres there for this year. Now, it's possible you could send Arizona Gleyber Torres in a deal, but Torres would have to approve that. It's accepting a qualifying offer gives you like this little baby no trade clause where you have to approve a trade until June 15th. You can't be traded against your will.
Well, I can tell you right here, right now, that Gleyber Torres prefers spring training in Florida as opposed to Arizona. So,
or do you want to go play for kind of a rebuilding Arizona team?
Well, there's that too.
Platform year. Maybe it'll be, who knows? Who knows what Gleyber would do there? But like you said, he probably would prefer to stay with the Tigers. So that's probably tough. So, and then beyond that, to get a player like Marte, you're almost certainly giving up Troy Melton, probably Colt Keefe, and probably a couple other pieces in the minors. And it might make you slightly better in 2026, but down the road, I don't know how much better it makes you. It's tough. Like, it would be an interesting splashy move for sure. It just doesn't feel like the right fit there.
Speaking of a bat, let's get to question 2 of the big 2. The Tigers' interest in Alex Bregman is lukewarm entering the winter meetings. Do you expect the Tigers to turn up the heat, or do you think the Tigers will stick with Colt Keefe at third base and stay focused on pitching? A little bit of background there. The Tigers like Alex Bregman as a player, And we know that because the Tigers offered 6 years, $171.5 million last offseason before Bregman signed with the Boston Red Sox. But as I've reported, the Tigers' interest is lukewarm so far this offseason. Here's what that means. The Tigers are monitoring the situation, keeping him on their board, on their radar, but they're not aggressively pursuing him right now. Based on my understanding, I would categorize it as non-committal right now. Now that could change here at the winter meetings, where there will be conversations between Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, and Bregman's agent, Scott Boras. For now, I don't think Bregman will sign with the Tigers. But again, that can change as quickly as the Tigers redefine their level of interest. But until that happens, this situation seems like it's nothing more than the Tigers liking Alex Bregman as a player and simply keeping tabs on his market.
Yeah, I mean, he still feels like an ideal fit for the team to me, right? It's a big right-handed bat, a great leader, plays a position of need, all that stuff. They tried the super aggressive pursuit last year. So maybe they're going like full pickup artist and trying to like neg him a little bit. Like, oh, no, we're not that interested, to see if he turns around. I don't think that works in sports, but hey, maybe they're giving it a shot. I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of surprising that they're not more interested, but they waited all off season for him last year and lost, got left at the altar. So maybe they're not going to put up with that this year. Maybe they're going to pursue other potential options. You don't hear much about it, but maybe like if they want an upgrade at third base, maybe they could look at Suarez. Just like if they can get him for a reasonable deal, then fine. We're not worried about Bregman. I do think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you go into next year with Colt Keith as your starting third baseman. He's a young player. He's got things to work on, but again, he's young. And it would be nice, I think, for him to finally have an offseason where he's not moving a position, learning to play second or learning to play first or moving all over the place. Like, just give him a set position, let him work on it and see what happens. And there's some room to get better offensively too. I think particularly if he works, does a little bat speed training in the off season, because he's got everything else is pretty good. His bat speed is a little bit light. And I think part of that is based on the way he swings. And part of it is just, I don't know, maybe something he can improve. But, he made some improvements last year that aren't necessarily super visible, but you can look at his numbers. He went from being in the 19th percentile in terms of pulling the ball in the air, which is, bottom fifth of the league, to above 50%. It was like 53%. So he made some real changes to his swing. It might not have jumped off the page, but if he can lean more into that, pulling the ball in the air, the power numbers come up and he'll look more like a traditional third baseman. Like I said, I think that's a completely acceptable option there. I wouldn't not sign Alex Bregman to have Colt Keith at third base, but if they don't sign Alex Bregman, I think they'll be okay.
I think it's important to remember how we got here. The Tigers pursued Alex Bregman aggressively for 3 months. They put the largest contract offer on the table, but instead, Alex Bregman signed with the Boston Red Sox for 3 years, $120 million, which included 2 opt-out clauses and a large amount of deferred money. And then after 1 season with the Red Sox, Bregman opted out in search of a long-term contract in free agency. We also have Gleyber Torres, who accepted the 1-year, $22.025 million qualifying offer to return to the Tigers instead of testing free agency. And when that happened, to the surprise of some within the Tigers organization, I think the chances of Bregman and the Tigers linking up this offseason became less likely. So as of today, it's Spencer Torkelson at first base, Gleyber Torres at second base, Javier Baez at shortstop, and Colt Keith at third base, with infield prospects Hao-Yu Lee, Max Anderson, and Kevin McGonigal coming soon. With all that being said, we know Alex Bregman is a good fit for the Tigers, but is he that good of a fit for the Tigers? Consider this. Bregman received 3 years, $120 million from the Red Sox. But what people don't understand is that $60 million was deferred, meaning the present day value was actually 3 years, $85 million, not 3 years, $120 million. That means Bregman earned $28 million from the Red Sox in 2025, not $40 million. I keep going back to this because it's what Scott Boras does with these short-term contracts with opt-outs. Alex Bregman wanted 7 years, $200 million last offseason. So to get there across 2 free agencies, after earning $28 million, not $40 million in 2025, he needs 6 years, $172 million without any deferred money this offseason. That's how he gets to 7 years, $200 million. If that's what it's going to take to lead the market and sign Bregman, do you think it's smart for the Tigers to do that? Or is it better to wait out the market and see how things unfold? Because if the Red Sox move on by signing Pete Alonso, and if the Cubs move on by signing Eugenio Suarez, then where does Bregman end up when it's time to report to spring training? Like, maybe he's the one who comes crawling back to the Tigers rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's with these free agency big deals, it's always a matter, it's a balancing act, right? Like, you want to be aggressive to get the guys you want, but if you think that their price is ridiculous and nobody else is going to give it to them, no harm in waiting it out. But we saw like I said, we saw the effect of that last year as they ended up not getting him. It really does depend on how much they want him. And you're reporting that it's kind of lukewarm, makes me feel like it's probably not going to happen. But again, like if you feel like you can get him at a good price, I think he's a great addition. Last year, it would have been he could have been a huge addition last year. And it sucks to think about that in retrospect, but 2026 is a new season and you've got to have new plans and new potential for the future. So yeah, I don't have a problem with them not going all out to get him. But sure, monitoring it and seeing what other people are offering him, nothing wrong with that.
Even more so than Bregman, I think Ha-Seong Kim could be maybe the best option for the Tigers. And the Tigers have interest in Ha-Seong Kim for the second offseason in a row. His primary position is shortstop, so there's a clear spot for him in the everyday lineup if you were to push Javier Baez into maybe a more fitting utility role. But he also plays second base and third base. It's a little bit complicated with Gleyber Torres as the everyday second baseman, but probably not as complicated as signing Alex Bregman to play third base for the next 6 years. For Ha-Seong Kim, it's probably going to be a 2-year contract, and the second year might even be a club option, which the Tigers love. He's a right-handed hitter. When he's right, he's hitting .250 with a 10% walk rate and a 20% strikeout rate with moderate power and above average defense at shortstop, second base, and third base. 2 years of Ha-Seong Kim or 6 years of Alex Bregman. At this point, when you consider Kevin McGonigal is coming, Colt Keith can play third base, and the Tigers would benefit from an upgrade at shortstop, sign me up for Ha-Seong Kim. I don't think he's the best player, but I do think he could be the best fit, even better than Alex Bregman and Bo Bichette. Plus, I also don't think the Tigers have enough payroll space to be able to add another starter, 2 relievers, and Alex Bregman. Not unless they're willing to go over $200 million, but I don't see that happening. However, they could add another starter, 2 relievers, and Ha-Seong Kim, all for about $35 to $40 million, taking the 2026 opening day payroll to roughly $175 million, which is where it would have been in 2025 had the Tigers signed Bregman last offseason. As for Ha-Seong Kim, does that name interest you?
It does. I mean, a right-handed bat who could play shortstop, I think would be a great add for them. You've mentioned Ahmed Rosario before. Like, I think they need somebody who can do that. And Kim is a great sort of utility guy. You're not going to get a ton of offense from him. You might get solid average offense from him, but given that ability to play defense at multiple infield positions and be another right-handed bat, it does pique my interest. And again, like you said, if they can get him for a relatively cheap deal, as it were, I'd be all in because it does still lengthen your lineup. Again, if he's not a big bopper, you're going to bet third or fourth or fifth. But yeah, he makes your team better and he fits the need that they have. So I'd be all for that.
All right, we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we're joined by Red Sox radio broadcaster Will Flemming to talk more about Alex Bregman. Everyone, I'd like to welcome Will Flemming, the radio voice of the Boston Red Sox, to the Days of Roar podcast for the first time, here to talk about free agent third baseman Alex Bregman. We had Houston Astros radio voice Robert Ford last offseason for this topic, so we're lucky to have Will this offseason after Bregman played for the Red Sox in the 2025 season. Will Flemming, thank you for joining me.
Evan, great to be with you, man. I love everything Detroit Tigers. I love all the people that run your organization. It's a class act up there, and I'm happy to be on with you.
Well, let's start with the question that everyone in Detroit wants to know. Where do you expect Alex Bregman to sign this offseason? And do you think the Tigers have any chance of landing him after finishing as one of his 3 finalists last offseason?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? I'd be lying if I felt certain that he'll be back in Boston. I know that Alex and his wife loved being with the Red Sox, and I know that he'd like to be back. And I know that there are parts of the Red Sox organization that would love to have Alex be their third baseman for the next 3-4 years. I do not read Craig Breslow's mind. I don't know their intentions. And I think that's what's fun about today. We're recording this on a Monday afternoon, right? The winter meetings are starting right now. And I think that it's a big game of musical chairs with all of these things. And whether it's Pete Alonso, Kyle Schwarber, Bo Bichette, all these guys are interconnected, and Bregman is one of those. I think the Red Sox went into the offseason with every intention of retaining Alex Bregman, and I think Alex wants to be in Boston, but his agent is Scott Boras. And so that plays itself out in its own way, and they don't want to be into a year with CBA uncertainty without a contract, so that's why he opts out. I don't think he's going to get $40 million for 6 years. He's not. I would be shocked if that happened. And so it comes down to, does a team like the Red Sox or another club value him for 5 years at $35 million? That's just the brass tacks of this thing. And we'll see. We'll see how the market plays out. I mean, I think it's sort of like Pete Alonso, right? Like we went through this show last year and the market said what it said. And both these guys in their own unique ways did things that make their incumbent teams the favorite, I guess, to retain them and make them more incentivized to keep them. And yet the market is what it is. And so God bless them both if they want to go and try to seek a 5-6 year deal for $35 million. I'm not sure that's there for either. So we'll see how it plays out. I know the Red Sox have huge interest in it. I know Alex had a great time in Boston. We'll see how it plays out.
The market is the market, and we are about to find out what the market says about Alex Bregman. But to learn more about him, what was it like for you getting to know him throughout the 2025 season? We all know what he can do on the field, but what was it like getting to know him behind the scenes?
Yeah, I would say that this is why he was a Boston Red Sox, is that Alex Cora knew him better than most people. And he said to the organization, and he really kind of pushed it across the finish line with some other people saying, we need this man, this leader, this veteran. And, you know, I think a lot of times in our business, that saying gets oversold and overhyped. Not with this guy. He is the consummate, ultimate pro, which is why Scott and Craig and all the people in baseball are trying so hard to have him part of their thing. And again, it's economics. It's simple math. Can we justify a mid-30s third baseman who might be on the back nine of his career and might get hurt a little bit more than he did before? Can we justify 5, 6, 7 years, 4 years at high dollars? I think most teams will say, we'll see. He was and is an incredible leader for this Red Sox team. Incredible. And the best part about Bregman is that he meshes with the manager. He meshes with the young up-and-coming superstar players that the Red Sox do have. And he also is a great mentor to, you know, the kind of the role players, the Rob Refsnyders, the Romy Gonzalez's. Alex Bregman is everything that every general manager should want and does want from a major league ball player. He just gets it. He's the first guy on the field to start the day. He works harder than everybody. He is a baseball rat. He wants to talk about it at all times, which I think, Evan, like in the modern game, I think we're undervaluing that. And that's where I think Kyle Schwarber should be overpaid. If any team can get Kyle Schwarber, they should. And he'll make his own decision. But like these people who live and breathe and drink it, who want to do nothing other than baseball, they're rare breeds. Everybody now is in the lab doing driveline. I shouldn't overuse that term, but everybody is doing TrackMan. Let's optimize grips and swing and launch angle and all this stuff. And those guys, Bregmans and Schwarbers of the world, they get into that, but it's founded on this bedrock of like lived baseball experience. And those guys have so much credibility in every room they walk into. And I'm telling you, to answer your question, Bregman did all of that times 100 in the Red Sox clubhouse.
What do you think led to the success that he had on the field? Because it's one thing what he does behind the scenes, but then you got to take it out on the field and perform. And it's easy to forget Alex Bregman, a 933 OPS in his first 83 games. I know he had the injury. I know he struggled a little bit down the stretch, but he was one of the best players for the Red Sox in 2025.
I don't know if you play golf or not, but if you do, you step on the par 4 that you like, that you sort of have that sight line and you know the tee shot and your body just tells you to do it. I think that's Fenway Park for Alex Bregman. I really do. And he just feels at home there. He's a great Fenway Park hitter. What made him a good player last year? All of it. I mean, like the work he put in, the preparation that he always does. I'd be lying if I told you I had all the answers to that. But what I do know is talking to everybody around him and to him, he just does the work. He does the work. And it's the right fit for him. And the guy, he just wants to be his best self at all times. And, the Red Sox were not the same team the minute he got hurt. And frankly, he wasn't the same player once he came back, and he had to kind of dial it back a little bit, choose when to push it on the base pass especially. But even when he was hurt, he was in the clubhouse, in the dugout, traveled with the team. He's the consummate professional teammate ball player that you want. If you want to have a champion, I think he's the kind of guy that you just want to have on your club.
With all that being said, and I know you hinted at this initially, but if you had to predict, what are the odds Alex Bregman signs with the Boston Red Sox again in free agency?
When the season ended, Evan, I would have said 90%, 95% even. But now I do think it's kind of a coin flip. I really do. And that's because there are going to be a lot of teams interested in him, and you never know. But I would just say, again, go back to last year. These guys played the market last year. The world tells them what is available. And do the Cubs have interest in Alex Bregman? Sure they do. Do the Tigers have interest in Bregman? Of course they do. The Tigers offered him 6 years and $175 whatever million, and he said no. And he came to Boston. There's a reason for that. Right? You have to think about these guys in a different context. This is not a Kyle Tucker. This is not even an Ohtani, although that's its own thing. These guys have a lot of options, and I think they have veteran wherewithal to know where they want to play and be. And I think that's where, from a Tigers perspective, things get very interesting, because it's sort of like the Blue Jays, who have now signed Cease. And once they're in the World Series, they stepped up. They were in on Soto and all of these big free agents, and nobody wants to live in Canada. They don't. That's just the reality of it. And from a free agent perspective, people did not previously want to live in Toronto. Tax implications, all these things. And frankly, I think that the Tigers face a similar challenge. It is an awesome baseball town. It's a great sport. It's one of America's best sports towns, but you only know that when you live there and you play there. And so somebody like Bregman, like Soto, like anybody, it's a harder ask of a player from the Tigers. It just is. Do you want to come to Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium or Dodger Stadium, or do you want to play in Detroit? It's a really hard, complicated thing, which is, I'm sure we'll talk about Skubal. I'm sure all these things come into play, but it's what Scott has done up there and what the team has done and built is remarkable, given that thing, which is so real. The modern player does not want to play in Detroit. They just don't. They want to go to warm climates or historic cities and towns. So the Tigers are operating with a handicap in that way. And I think that's where your fan base needs to understand how remarkable it is what has happened there, given those facts.
We'll get to Tarik Skubal, but aside from Bregman, what are the other priorities for the Red Sox this offseason? It seems like there's rumblings of some big bats, a frontline starter to pitch behind Garrett Crochet in the rotation. Did the Red Sox already address the rotation by trading for Sonny Gray? And what else is out there for them with both pitchers and position players?
I think the one thing about Craig Breslow is that we've learned that he is a monster of the offseason, and he does deliver on the things that he says he wants to do. And he went into this offseason saying, we need a number 2 starter and we need 2 impact bats. Okay. So I don't think that he views Sonny Gray as the lock, stop, game over number 2 starter. I think the Twins just came out and said they don't want to trade Joe Ryan. Fine. So Joe Ryan's off the table. I think it's very real that the Red Sox will still try to trade a ton of high prospect talent to get a number 2 starter. I think that'd be their preferred avenue for pitching. And they're going to get 2 bats. And if Bregman's one of them, great. If it's a Bregman-Tucker combo, if it's a Bregman-Schwarber-Alonso combo, 2 of those 3 or 4 guys, I think they're going to really actively pursue that. Again, these markets are so unpredictable, and we'll see what the other teams in the game offer. And do the Cincinnati Reds woo Kyle Schwarber home, where he's from, in his native sort of area, with a 4-year, $160 million deal? I don't know. It's possible. And would he be really intrigued by that? Yes, he would. So I think definitely the Red Sox, whether they trade for Ketel Marte and then sign a Bregman or an Alonso, or any of those other combinations. I think the one thing about Craig Breslow that's wild and so hard for somebody like me who knows him and works with and for him, he's just unpredictable. Could they sign the Japanese first baseman and then trade for a pitcher that Freddie Peralta? All of those things are on the table. I do know that they know they need to get a lot better. Look, the Red Sox are not in the Tigers division. Like the Blue Jays were in the World Series. The Yankees are the Yankees. The Orioles were out of all of their starting pitching. The Rays are the Rays. Like, it is the hardest division going. It just is. And so I think that the ownership group and the GM know we've got to get better. Like they're not deluded by this. They also traded Rafi Devers in the middle of the season last year, and they've got all that money to spend too. And I don't think that when they say they want to reallocate that money, that is like appeasing the fan base. They want to spend the money. Now, do they want to go into the third tax threshold? We'll see about that. But they want to be in the top, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams in spending, and then give themselves some leeway if they've got a really good club to add at the deadline. But I believe them wholeheartedly. They want to spend. They've got money to do it. So I really do think that in the next, let's call it 3, 4, 5 days, I think the Red Sox could make some huge headlines.
So if Craig Breslow is unpredictable, do you think the Red Sox, or any team for that matter, should trade for Tarik Skubal, who will cost a fortune to land via trade, only to become a free agent after the 2026 season? What are your thoughts on that situation?
How many times can I say yes? Yes, 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 yes. And I think Scott faces something that the Red Sox face with Mookie Betts, where it's a little different because Boston's Boston, Detroit's Detroit, and not to disparage the Detroit market, but a free agent player in theory should want to be in Boston forever. I'm not sure that Mookie really would have stayed. I think there's been some revisionist history about all that. They offered him $300 million the year before he got traded, and he said no. He was always the guy who wanted to test the market. Tarik Skubal has a chance to be the highest paid pitcher of all time. And the Tigers are not going to do that. I think it's a similar situation where no matter how much money they throw at him, he loves it. And he's my favorite pitcher, not named Garrett Crochet, in baseball, because they're so similar, right? It's just that FU mentality. And every time they take the ball, you know what you're going to get. So I've always been sort of the Dave Dombrowski mentality, and don't sleep on the Phillies to get Skubal too. I don't think they have the prospect capital to do it. But Dave is the kind of guy who sees a guy like Skubal on a free agent pending deal and says, F it. This is the best pitcher in the game. I don't know what this 19-year-old shortstop is going to look like. I don't know what this 23-year-old starting right fielder for me right now is going to be in the end. I do know what Skubal is, and he can win me a World Series. So I think that there's a very good chance that a big market club steps up and does it, and anyone who has that opportunity, I swear to God, Evan, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I would trade every single prospect in the system for Skubal. And if you don't do that, to your question, like, you have the money to re-up him, and you'd like to talk to him and say, all right, we're going to make you the highest paid pitcher in the game after we trade for you. But to me, if a guy like that is available, trade everybody. And that includes the starting outfield of the club right now. Trade everyone to get an asset like that. I would do that.
A big reason for the Tigers' success, it's Tarik Skubal. What have been your thoughts on what the Tigers have done over the past 2 seasons with leadership from President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris, reaching the ALDS in back-to-back seasons? How do you view the Tigers among the other 29 teams? And watching from afar, how close do you think they are to winning the World Series?
Those two are very different questions. I think that what Scott has done and what Chris leads there is an amazing thing. And I think I had an opportunity to talk to them about their television job and meet with them. And I was so impressed with everything the Tigers are doing. And I think Scott Harris is really one of the great young executives in the entire sport. And I think he prioritizes the right things. And I think he gets it. Not only the key to the modern game now is, of course, everybody's got the same tools. Everybody values analytics and all these things. It's, do you have the wherewithal to understand team culture, personality, like all the things that go into a clubhouse and a roster? And I think Scott is one of those guys. And frankly, I feel lucky to know him pretty well. I think that Scott is one of these unicorns in baseball where he gets all of the modern stuff. He knows all the numbers and all the analytics, and he'll challenge you on everything in the best possible way. And he'll also understand humanity and want to hire the best people. And you've got a great manager in AJ Hinch. I mean, there are not many other than Alex Cora that I would trade for other than AJ. Like, you have a great GM and a great manager. The question becomes, do players at the highest level want to play in Detroit? And does Scott work over that competitive disadvantage? I mean, that's the crazy part of this thing. And they're doing it. And they're finding these undiscovered talents and making them really good players in a way. And Green is great. Carpenter's awesome. Like, maybe the young pitching other than Skubal is not materialized in the way that maybe the previous regime would have hoped. But I trust in Scott 100% to make those right decisions and get the right pieces.
All right, before we get out of here, I want to invite our listeners to learn about your journey as a broadcaster. Your brother, Dave, has been the play-by-play broadcaster for the San Francisco Giants since 2003. But how did you become the radio voice of the Red Sox? What's your backstory?
We don't have 2 hours to tell that, but
Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, I went to Stanford in California. I did radio broadcasting there, but I never went to school thinking I would be a big league broadcaster. Obviously, my brother showed me that it can be a viable thing. And I started in tech. I worked in Silicon Valley and loved that. And then after 10 years of doing that, I thought to myself, my heart's not in this. I need to pursue my dream. So it took me 9 years in the minor leagues, Lancaster, Potomac, Indianapolis, Pawtucket, and then to the Red Sox. And it's a journey that I'll never change anything for. I would never regret any step. It was hard, but all the good things in life are hard. And I'm thrilled that I made that choice.
Hey, one more thing, and it's about the Tigers and it's about the Red Sox and it's about Patriots Day. The Tigers are coming to Fenway Park in Boston for Patriots Day. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into what that's like? What are Tigers fans who make the trip going to experience? What am I going to take in? What are the players going to experience? That's a pretty important day, especially there in Boston.
I'll tell you what, Evan, there is no better sports day in America than Patriots Day in Boston. It's something that, it's so emotional for everyone in Boston. And it took on a different tone in 2013 with the marathon bombing. And I work with Will Middlebrooks on the radio a lot of times. And he says the most emotional day of his entire life was taking the field for the first time after the bombing. There's a very narrow tunnel. Fenway is an old, constrained, historic ballpark, which is part of its glory. You walk into Fenway Park, you smell the spilled beer and the mustard of 100 years. You really do. And you walk out and you see the Green Monster and you feel the history of everything that's happened there. And in the same way, there's only so much we can do with our clubhouses. Like, the Tigers are in a space not bigger than my living room as their clubhouse. The home clubhouse sits right, obviously, behind the first base dugout, and there's a long staircase down, and then a very long, thin hallway that now has the batting cages adjacent to it. And Middlebrooks tells me that the day that he ran out onto the field after the marathon bombing, that hallway, and I'm literally, it basically brings me to tears thinking about it, lined by Boston fire and police, the people that sought out the bombing perpetrators, right? And the whole city was on total lockdown, and it was such a civic rallying cry. And obviously everybody remembers Ortiz's speech, "This is our city." And that just embodied everything that was Boston. Boston Strong became a totally real thing. So that has changed it a little bit. I mean, it used to be, and it still is. And that's the cool thing as life goes on and as everything changes, we're trying very hard to get back to this joyous celebration of athletic achievement. And what's wild and so great about it is it starts with the wheelchair participants at the starting line of the Boston Marathon. And then it's the elite Kenyan runners who are battling with Americans, and they're going through Kenmore Square. Literally, as the game is going, the finishers of the marathon, we can see them, the champions, behind the walls of Fenway Park. And there is a certain, look, as I said, I think Detroit is one of the great sports towns in America. I don't know there are many better than Boston. And the passion of the place is on full display that day. And there's a certain total civic buy-in to that day. Everybody gets up, they get along the race route, and it is such an emotional day for Bostonians. And as I say, 13 elevated it to a different, more serious level, but it doesn't eliminate the joy of it. So many people have spent their years training for this race and want to be a part of it. And again, now, like that day, almost always, we have the parents of Martin Richard, an 8-year-old boy who was killed at the finish line, on with us to talk about the Boston Marathon. And his parents walk out and his sister throws out the first pitch. And it's that perfect thing. This is why we all love sports, right? It's why George W. Bush, after 9/11, threw out the first pitch in a bulletproof vest and threw a strike, and that resonates. That happens every year at Fenway Park on Marathon Day. Patriots Day is the best day of the year. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. And to me, it's everything that's great about all that we love about sports.
That's just incredible. You're giving me goosebumps thinking about it. I can't wait to experience it. I'm already looking forward to seeing you for Patriots Day, and I'm sure it's going to be an emotional day, and I'm sure Alex Bregman will be on the field somewhere, either for
one of those uniforms, right? I think he'll be with Boston. I do think he'll be their third baseman. Here are my predictions, Evan. I got Pete Alonso at first base, Bregman at third, and Tarik Skubal, the number 1, number 2, 1A, 1B starter for the Boston Red Sox.
Will Flemming, everyone. Thank you for joining the Days of Roar podcast to share your insights about Alex Bregman, along with some other Tigers-related topics from your perspective. Thanks again for joining me.
Loved it, Evan. Thank you so much.
Everyone, that was Will Flemming, the play-by-play radio broadcaster for the Boston Red Sox. We have more to discuss this week, including 5 Tarik Skubal mock trades. But first, let's take a break. We're back. Thanks again to Will Flemming, radio broadcaster for the Red Sox, for joining us this week. All right, Chris Brown, the winter meetings are underway, which means it's all Tarik Skubal talk. I came up with 5 hypothetical trades for the Tigers with the winter meetings underway. The 5 trades sending Tarik Skubal to the Los Angeles Dodgers, New York Mets, Baltimore Orioles, Boston Red Sox, and New York Yankees. I'm going to go through each of these mock trades one by one and get your reaction as we go down the list. The first one, Tarik Skubal to the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers acquire Tarik Skubal. The Tigers acquire right-hander Emmett Sheehan, shortstop Alex Freeland, left-hander Jackson Ferris, and right-hander Christian Zazueta. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I like this deal. This one seemed plausible to me in terms of something that the Tigers would actually accept, because Emmett Sheehan is a guy who's already had success in the big leagues as a starter. And they're going to have to get somebody back like that to even consider a trade, I think. And then beyond that, yeah, you have Jackson Ferris was a guy that they got from the Cubs in a trade a couple of years ago. They liked him. He's been kind of up and down, but it's a lefty starter with good stuff. And, yeah, and then those are the two key pieces of that. And then you get another infielder, switch hitter, who can play shortstop. And I think, again, we talked about that as a need. That would be huge for them. And now Freeland, I don't know if he's anything more than an average or slight upgrade over Trey Sweeney or whatever, but it's another potential body there. And he does have some potential. So yeah, I like that trade a lot for them.
Tarik Skubal to the New York Mets. Mets acquire Tarik Skubal. Tigers acquire third baseman Mark Vientos, right-hander Jonah Tong, right-hander Brandon Sproat, and right-hander Will Watson. All yours.
Yeah, this one was a little bit tougher for me because I'm still kind of skeptical on Jonah Tong. He's a very highly rated prospect and he was awesome in the minors. He got up to the big leagues last year, but he's got a really unique delivery and arm slot that you just don't see from starters. It's actually the same arm slot as Trey Savage. So if you want to be like a big time believer, then you could say, oh, he could be like that. I'm not as convinced that he can consistently land his breaking balls in the zone, and he's going to have to rely on a lot of chase, and that gets into danger territory. It's a good prospect. I'm not crazy about him. And same with Sproat. Sproat was a guy who's always had a big arm. He feels like an previous Tigers regime arm that they would have targeted. A guy from Florida who throws 100, and he's had some ups and downs in the minors. He was taken off in like AA, and he got to AAA and stopped striking people out. So they had to tweak his arsenal a little bit, but it's a good arm. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind that. And then, you've got some other pieces there that are quality. It's just, I don't know that the Tigers make a deal with the Mets if they're not getting Nolan McLean. And I don't think the Mets are trading Nolan McLean.
Tarik Skubal to the Baltimore Orioles. Orioles acquire Tarik Skubal. Tigers acquire second baseman / shortstop Jackson Holliday, left-hander Cade Povich, right-hander Trey Gibson, and outfielder Reed Tremble. Do you think the Orioles would be willing to trade Jackson Holliday? I'm operating under the assumption that they would be able to, but do you think they will or do you think they won't? And then additionally, if the Orioles were willing to trade Jackson Holliday, would you do this deal?
Yeah, that's those are good questions there. I feel like teams are less likely to trade their former number one overall pick for whatever reason, even if it's, he hasn't proven to be great so far. I don't think they would trade Jackson Holliday. I think they still believe that he can be even better than he has been.
But if they would,
if they would, that would be a great value. And I think the Tigers would definitely consider it. The one thing you have to be convinced of is, can he play the left side of the infield? Because otherwise he's just another second baseman, and you've got so many of those. But he's a very talented young player, still 22. You got to think that there's better years ahead of him. And beyond that, I really like Trey Gibson a lot. I feel like he's kind of flown under the radar in a lot of prospect rankings. He's kind of reminds me of Troy Melton a little bit. Doesn't throw quite as hard as Melton, but it's pretty close. And he's got good stuff. And Povich is a guy who's been in the big leagues. It hasn't, been great, but it's something for you to work with. And then Reed Tremble is I think he's a switch hitting outfielder, or he's an outfielder in any regard. So something that they need in the system. So I think the value is there. I'm just, I'm 50-50 as to whether either team would take it. So maybe that makes it a good trade. I don't know.
Tarik Skubal to the Boston Red Sox. Red Sox acquire Tarik Skubal. Tigers acquire outfielder / infielder Christian Campbell, left-hander Connolly Early, and right-hander David Sandlin. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a really fun one because, the Red Sox signed Campbell to that big extension before the year. Last year, he came out on fire, and then it kind of all collapsed, and he was back down in AAA, and it wasn't looking great. And there's some concerns about the mechanics of his swing. And he was a great story. I think he was a third or fourth rounder, and the Red Sox worked on him with bat speed and launch angle, and he turned into this monster prospect. There's still work to be done there. He would be a very fun name to add to the organization. And then you have two interesting pitchers too. Connolly Early is a lefty with some good extension and some interesting stuff that would help you. You could put him in the rotation right now. Probably he may need a little bit more time in the minors. And then Sandlin's got some interesting stuff. I lean more to him in the bullpen with the way the Tigers are targeting relievers and turning them to starters. Maybe they would be fine with that. But yeah, that's another one I think where the value is right. It's just that would take some guts. You'd have to really be confident that Campbell is going to turn things around.
Tarik Skubal to the New York Yankees. Yankees acquire Tarik Skubal. Tigers acquire outfielder Jason Dominguez, right-hander Carlos LaGrange, right-hander Ben Hess, and right-hander Cade Smith. Take it away.
Well, this is another one that's interesting. I've seen a bunch of these players in person. LaGrange is filthy. He still walks a few too many people to make you a little bit scared that he might end up in the bullpen, but he throws 102, 103 with like a 90-mile-an-hour slider. It's pretty nasty. Hess is another guy who's kind of like Trey Gibson. He's a good prospect that the Yankees seem to always have these guys that oddly enough don't get enough prospect buzz somehow because they're just kind of pedestrian looking starters, and they come to the big leagues and they're pretty good. You've seen it with Michael King and Will Warren and all these guys. So I would like him. And then, the big name there, though, the one that would raise eyebrows is Jason Dominguez, the Martian, right? Like he was people were comparing to Mickey Mantle when he was 17. And he's such a unique, interesting player. He's like Zion Williamson, the baseball player. He's like 5'9", but like 240 pounds of pure muscle. And he's like a 70 runner. He's also one of the worst outfield defenders I've ever seen. I don't know why. We saw him in Erie a few years back, and it was like, oh my God, what is he doing? Like he didn't see the ball, and he was diving, and it was bad. But he is another young guy who's got some power and he's got some tools. So if you think you can clean it up a little bit, I know there's some Yankees fans who believe the Yankees are really bad at teaching fundamentals. So maybe, again, there's a lot to like there. This one I would be a little bit more skeptical of. It's a pretty huge boom or bust trade. If LaGrange becomes a starter and Dominguez, you figure him out, then it would be great. But there's a pretty high probability that neither of those things happen.
Mock trades are always fun, especially when they involve Tarik Skubal. Before we get out of here, are there any names we should be watching for in the Rule 5 draft, which is Wednesday? I'm not anticipating the Tigers will select anyone, but are there any unprotected prospects from the Tigers organization that could be poached by one of the other 29 teams? Right-handed reliever RJ Pettit, he has picked up popularity recently on social media as a Rule 5 draft eligible player. For those who don't know, he is 6'8", 300 pounds. Someone on Twitter referenced his mustache as a squirrel on his upper lip. Somebody else said that's Spencer Strider if he ate Spencer Strider. Another person said his name is Pettit, LOL, referring to Petite. And here's the best part. RJ Pettit posted a 2.44 ERA with 79 strikeouts across 66 and 1/3 innings in 47 games, spanning 27 games in AA Erie and 20 games in AAA Toledo. There is no doubt that this big fella is ready for his MLB debut in 2026, which makes him a likely candidate to be selected in the Rule 5 draft. Are you watching RJ Pettit, and are there other names that you're keeping tabs on as well?
Yeah, he's the primary one. I would think there was some thought that he might be added, but they did add 5 guys, so they couldn't add 6. But yeah, I've seen him pitch for years now. And to be honest, I was never overly impressed with him. Now, yeah, he absolutely does look like an offensive lineman. It's absurd. You want him like the first guy off the bus. That's the guy you want to intimidate people. But for all his size, and he'll hit 98, 99 even at times. He doesn't, like the fastball doesn't blow hitters away. It's just got pedestrian shape. And he doesn't have elite extension for a guy that tall. It's actually less than his height. It's like 6'6". But he does have, I always liked his changeup, which he didn't throw a ton. And when he got to AAA, the Tigers started having him throw his slider like half the time. And that worked really well. And it's not like a visually appealing sweeper type slider. It's more like a Bo Brisky slider where it just kind of spins and then drops. And it was really effective for him. But as you pointed out, like the main thing here is he's got time at AAA. He's got a handful of pitches and he's had success. And that makes you an ideal Rule 5 draft candidate for somebody who just wants to add a piece to the bullpen. So I'm expecting him to get taken. If he doesn't, I'd be slightly shocked, but then you never really know what teams are looking for or what kind of data they have. Beyond him, there's not a whole lot of obvious candidates. I mean, Gage Workman was taken last year, but that didn't really work out well. So, I mean, somebody might try it again. And the interesting thing is if you get taken in the Rule 5 draft twice, you don't have to go back to your original team. You could just become a free agent. But then, yeah, there's some other players kind of like him. Peyton Graham is a guy I mentioned, but he hasn't been to AA. Eric Silva is kind of like an under the radar pitcher that they got from San Francisco in the Mark Hanna trade. And he's had a bunch of time in AA, not a bunch of time, but like 2 seasons. And he's got a starter's arsenal. So he would be like, a deep cut there. Somebody was like, hey, we like him. We think we could get him to stick in a middle relief role, like Mason Englert style. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know. There are some interesting arms down there. Ricky Vanasco has been in the big leagues. There's Troy Watson. There's Tyler Owens. There's Yosber Sanchez. I don't expect any of those guys to get taken, but if one of them does, I'll just go, okay. Most of the time, it doesn't work out. It's the Rule 5.
Yeah, I think Troy Watson is a candidate to be selected in the Rule 5 draft, but only if a team is willing to pay the $1.2 million, which is what he earns if he's in the big leagues in 2026, according to his minor league contract. The Tigers definitely used that minor league contract, agreeing to the deal before the 2025 season even ended, as a way to keep other teams from taking Watson in the Rule 5 draft. Just as a refresher, like if a player is selected in the Rule 5 draft, and that player must stay on the active 26-man roster of the new team for the entire season. And if the player is removed, then the player will be exposed to waivers. And if the player clears waivers, then the player will be offered back to the old team. He was good. I mean, he's somebody who has talent. Like the Tigers love him as starter depth with upside because his stuff is off the charts. But will another team think he's worth paying $1.2 million in the big leagues? That I don't think so.
No, I agree with you. I think that was a kind of a smart move on their part if they really like him that much. I'm still a bit skeptical of his fastball, but I'm not a pitching coach, so we'll see.
All right, it's time to get out of here live from the winter meetings in Orlando. Thanks to Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for co-hosting with me this week. Thanks to everyone out there for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Drop us a rating and comment what you think about the show. And please stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage during the hot stove season. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.